The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floor of the Grand Plaza Hotel as Pam Bondi wheeled her modest carry-on through the revolving doors. She'd left her designer luggage at home, along with her tailored suits and signature pearls. Today she wore faded jeans, a plain navy sweater, and minimal makeup. Her usually perfectly styled blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No one would recognize her as the newly appointed CEO of Luxury Horizons Hotel Group, the company that had just acquired this very establishment, and that was exactly the point. Pam adjusted her reading glasses, ones she rarely wore in public, and took a moment to observe the lobby before approaching the front desk. The space was beautiful, with soaring ceilings, fresh flower arrangements, and plush seating areas. But beauty wasn't enough. The question that had kept her up at night was whether the service matched the surroundings. 3 different employees walked past without acknowledging her presence. That was strike one in Pam's mental notebook. "I have a reservation," she said when she finally reached the reception desk. The young man behind the counter continued typing for several seconds before looking up. "Name?" he asked flatly, his eyes never quite meeting hers. "Patricia Miller," Pam replied, using her maiden name. She'd made the reservation online 3 days ago, careful to use her personal credit card rather than any company accounts. The clerk's fingers moved lazily across the keyboard. "ID and credit card," he said, extending his hand without adding please or offering any greeting. Strike 2. As Pam handed over her documents, she noticed a small stain on the clerk's uniform. His name tag was slightly crooked. These weren't major issues on their own, but they were signs of a culture that had grown comfortable with good enough rather than excellent. "You're in room 714, he said, sliding a keycard across the counter. "Elevators are to your right, no mention of amenities. No offer of assistance with luggage. No welcome to the hotel. Strike 3. "Is there a time when breakfast is served?" Pam asked, testing to see if she could prompt better service. The clerk sighed almost imperceptibly. "Breakfast is 6:30 to 10 in the restaurant on the 2nd floor. "Anything else?" His tone made it clear he hoped there wouldn't be anything else. "That's all." "Thank you," Pam replied with a smile that wasn't returned. As she rolled her suitcase toward the elevators, Pam took mental notes. The lobby plants needed dusting. A used coffee cup sat abandoned on a side table. The marble floor, while initially impressive, showed scuff marks that should have been buffed out. The elevator took nearly 2 minutes to arrive, and when it did, it was occupied by a housekeeper with a cart, who barely made room for Pam to enter. "Which floor?" the housekeeper asked, sounding tired. 7, please." The ride-up was silent. The housekeeper exited on the 6th floor without a word. Pam noticed the elevator's inspection certificate was 3 months out of date. Another note for her growing list. Room 714 was located at the far end of a long hallway. Pam passed a room service tray that had clearly been sitting outside a door for hours. As she approached her room, she heard the unmistakable sound of staff laughing loudly from around the corner, probably at a housekeeping station. Nothing wrong with enjoying your job, but the volume was inappropriate for guest corridors. The key card failed on the first try. And the second. On the third attempt, the light finally turned green, allowing Pam to push open the heavy door. The room itself was spacious and well-appointed, a corner king with views of the city skyline. Fresh flowers sat on the desk and the bed linens looked crisp and inviting. But a professional eye caught what an average guest might miss. A thin layer of dust on the television screen, water spots on the bathroom faucet, and fingerprints on the glass coffee table. Pam set down her suitcase and walked to the window. 3 months ago, when Luxury Horizons began acquisition talks with the Grand Plaza's previous owners, this property had been described as the jewel of the city, with unparalleled customer service. The financials looked strong, and online reviews were generally positive, but numbers and reviews could be misleading. That's why Pam had decided on this undercover visit before the official announcement of her appointment went public. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. "Board packet ready for Monday's announcement. Anything else you need before your vacation ends?" Pam smiled. Only 3 people knew where she really was: her assistant, the company's head of legal, and her husband. To everyone else, she was taking a long weekend to recharge before starting her new role. "All good," she texted back. "We'll check in tomorrow." She unpacked her simple wardrobe, placing clothes in drawers that stuck slightly when pulled open. In the bathroom, she found only 2 towels instead of the standard 3, and the promised luxury toiletries were missing the conditioner. Time to test room service. Pam picked up the hotel phone and pressed the button labeled room service. After 8 rings, someone answered with a hurried "room service. Please hold." Before she could respond, bland music filled the line. 4 minutes later, she timed it. A different voice came on the line. "Sorry for the wait. What can I get you?" The voice sounded harried and unwelcoming. "I'd like to order some tea, please," Pam said. "Hot tea, what kind?" "We have regular and herbal." The question came with an impatient undertone. "What herbal options do you have?" Pam asked. A sigh came through the line. "Just a minute." She heard the sound of paper shuffling. "We have chamomile or mint." "Mint would be lovely," Pam said, keeping her tone pleasant despite the poor service. "Anything else?" "Perhaps some fruit if that's possible." Another pause. "We have a fruit plate for $18. "That sounds fine, thank you." "Name and room number?" "Patricia Miller, room 714. It'll be up in 20 to 30 minutes. The line went dead before Pam could respond. She took out her notebook, an actual paper one, not her usual tablet, and began making notes while the interaction was fresh in her mind. Customer service was built on 1,000 small moments like these. Get them right and guests felt valued. Get them wrong, and no amount of marble lobbies or skyline views could compensate. 45 minutes later, a knock finally came at her door. A young man stood there with a tray looking as if he'd rather be anywhere else. "Room service," he announced unnecessarily. "Thank you," Pam said, opening the door wider. He walked in and placed the tray on the desk rather than the proper dining table by the window. "Just sign here," he said, thrusting a check toward her. Pam noticed there was no teapot, just a cup with a tea bag beside it. The hot water was in a paper coffee cup rather than a proper serving container. The fruit plate looked hastily assembled, with browning apple slices suggesting it had been prepared quite some time ago. She signed the check, adding a generous tip despite the service. She'd never penalized staff financially for what was clearly a systemic problem. The server took the signed slip without thanking her and left without asking if there was anything else she needed. Pam sat by the window, sipping the mediocre tea and looking out at the city she'd known her whole life. The Grand Plaza had been an institution here for decades. She remembered coming here as a child for special Sunday brunches, how the staff had known her father's name, how they'd always saved his favorite table by the garden window. What had happened to that level of care? When had indifference replaced attentiveness? And more importantly, how could she fix it? This wasn't just about one hotel. As the new CEO, the culture she established here would ripple across all 37 properties in the Luxury Horizons portfolio. Get it right, and thousands of employees would take pride in their work. Get it wrong, and the company would be just another soulless chain where guests were processed rather than welcomed. Pam opened her notebook again and began to write. Tomorrow she would experience more of the hotel, the restaurant, the fitness center, the business facilities. She'd interact with as many staff members as possible, all while keeping her identity secret. Then, once she had the full picture, she would reveal herself, not to punish but to transform. She just hoped the staff was ready for what was coming. Pam woke early the next morning, the unfamiliar hotel bed having done her back no favors. She stretched and winced, making a mental note to check mattress replacement schedules once she officially took over. The digital clock on the nightstand read 6:45 a.m., perfect timing to test the breakfast service, right after opening. She dressed in simple black pants and a blue button-up shirt, nice enough to be respectable but nowhere near the designer outfits she typically wore to board meetings. After running a brush through her hair and applying minimal makeup, she slipped her room key and notebook into her pocket and headed downstairs. The restaurant on the second floor was called The Terrace, though Pam noted there wasn't actually a terrace to be found. About a dozen tables were occupied, mostly by business travelers in suits typing on laptops or scrolling through phones while absently forking eggs into their mouths. No host greeted her at the entrance. After standing awkwardly for nearly 2 minutes, Pam simply seated herself at an empty table near the window. A busboy walked past without acknowledging her presence. A waitress chatted with a cook through the service window, laughing loudly about weekend plans. 3 different staff members made eye contact with Pam and then looked away without approaching her table. Finally, after 7 minutes of waiting, she'd been timing it on her watch, a server with tousled hair and a wrinkled uniform approached. "Coffee?" he asked without introducing himself or offering a menu. "Yes, please," Pam replied. "And may I see a breakfast menu?" "Buffets along the wall," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the back of the restaurant. "Coffee'll be right up." He walked away before she could respond. The coffee didn't arrive for another 20 minutes. During that time, Pam observed the dining room with growing concern. Tables remained uncleared long after guests departed. The buffet food wasn't being replenished promptly. The egg tray sat empty for over 15 minutes. 2 servers stood at the service station, scrolling through their phones and whispering to each other while guests tried unsuccessfully to get their attention. When her coffee finally arrived, it was lukewarm and bitter. The server plunked it down without a word and disappeared again before she could ask for cream. Pam made her way to the buffet, which was disappointing at best. The fruit looked tired, the pastries were clearly not made in-house, and the hot offerings were barely warm. She took a small plate of fruit and a croissant, more as props than from any actual appetite. The standards here were nowhere near what Luxury Horizons hotels were supposed to maintain. Back at her table, she jotted notes in her small notebook, careful to look like she might be writing emails rather than evaluating the establishment. When she finished her mediocre breakfast, she looked around for her server to ask for the check. After 5 more minutes of trying to catch someone's eye, she realized that her room key card served as the payment method, and she could simply leave. How many other guests had this same confused experience? Instead of returning to her room immediately, Pam decided to explore the hotel facilities. The fitness center was small but adequate, though she noticed dust collecting in the corners and weight racks that hadn't been properly organized. The business center printer was out of paper with no staff in sight to assist. The gift shop wasn't scheduled to open for another hour, despite the posted opening time having passed 20 minutes ago. By the time Pam returned to her room, it was nearly 10 a.m. Housekeeping had not yet arrived, which wasn't unusual, but she decided to test their responsiveness. She called the front desk. "Front desk," answered a clipped voice. "Good morning," Pam said pleasantly. "I was wondering if I could get some additional towels brought to room 714. "Housekeeping handles that. I'll transfer you." Before Pam could respond, she was listening to ringing followed by an automated voice. "You've reached the housekeeping department. No one is available to take your call. Please leave a message." Pam hung up without leaving a message and tried the front desk again. "Front desk," said the same voice, now with a hint of annoyance at the repeat caller. "I'm sorry to bother you again," Pam said, "but housekeeping isn't answering. I just need some extra towels in room 714. A sigh came through the phone. "I'll make a note of it." The line went dead. 45 minutes later, Pam was still waiting for towels. She'd also discovered that the in-room coffee maker hadn't been cleaned from the previous guest's use. A used coffee pod still sat in the machine, and the water reservoir contained stale water. She decided to try a different approach and stopped by the front desk in person on her way out to explore the city. The young woman behind the counter was tapping away at her phone, only looking up when Pam cleared her throat. "Hi there," Pam said with a smile. "I called earlier about getting some extra towels sent up to room 714, but they haven't arrived yet." The clerk, her name tag read Tina, gave a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Housekeeping is probably backed up. I'll remind them." "Thank you," Pam said. "Also, the coffee maker in my room hasn't been cleaned. There's a used pod still in it from the previous guest." Tina's expression shifted from disinterest to mild irritation. "I can make another note for housekeeping, but they're really busy right now." "I understand," Pam said. "But cleanliness is rather important, don't you think? Especially with a hotel of this caliber." The comment seemed to bounce off Tina without making an impact. "Like I said, I'll make a note. Is there anything else?" Pam considered mentioning the other issues she'd encountered, but decided it wouldn't make a difference. "No, that's all. Thank you for your help." As she turned to leave, she noticed the front desk supervisor watching the interaction from a back office, making no move to intervene or offer assistance. That spoke volumes about the leadership culture. Pam spent a few hours wandering the historic district near the hotel, her mind more on the problems she'd observed than the sights around her. When she returned to her room at 2 p.m., she found that housekeeping had indeed visited. The bed was made, and the bathroom had been cleaned, though not thoroughly. Water spots remained on the shower glass, and the floor hadn't been properly swept. The coffee maker still contained the old pod. No fresh towels had been delivered. Pam picked up the room service menu to order lunch, only to find that half the items were crossed out with a pen, suggesting they were unavailable. She called room service and, after waiting on hold for several minutes, ordered a simple club sandwich and iced tea. While waiting for her food, she opened her laptop to check emails and found the Wi-Fi was excruciatingly slow. A call to the front desk about the internet was met with the unhelpful suggestion to try moving closer to the door. Her food arrived after 50 minutes, well beyond the 30-minute guarantee printed on the menu. The sandwich was dry, the fries were cold, and the iced tea had no ice. The room service attendant dropped the tray on the desk and thrust a check at her without a word. After picking at her disappointing lunch, Pam decided to visit the hotel bar, curious if the service there would be any better. The spacious lounge was nearly empty at mid-afternoon, with just two other patrons sitting far apart from each other. The bartender was leaning against the back counter, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when Pam sat down, nor after she'd been waiting for several minutes. She finally had to call out, "Excuse me," to get his attention. "Yeah," he said, barely glancing up from his device. "Could I get a sparkling water with lime, please?" Pam asked. He nodded and slowly put his phone down, though Pam noticed he positioned it carefully so he could still see the screen while he worked. He slid the water across the bar without a napkin or a smile. "Anything else?" he asked, already reaching for his phone again. "Actually, yes," Pam said. "How long have you worked here at the Grand Plaza?" The question seemed to surprise him. "About 2 years, I guess. And do you enjoy it?" He shrugged. "It's a job. Has it always been like this?" She pressed. "The service, I mean." Now he looked at her more carefully, perhaps wondering if she was from corporate or a critic. It was better before the buyout talk started. Everybody's just waiting to see if they'll still have jobs when the new company takes over. There it was. The staff knew about the acquisition but didn't understand that Luxury Horizons rarely cut staff during transitions. Instead, they invested in training and development. That misunderstanding needed to be corrected, but not by Patricia Miller. "I see," Pam said. "Thank you for the water." She left a generous tip and returned to her room deep in thought. The problems she'd observed weren't just about lazy employees or poor training. There was a culture of uncertainty and fear underlying the apathy. People who feared for their jobs rarely gave their best. Tomorrow would be her final day undercover. She'd test the concierge services, try breakfast again to see if it was consistently poor, and make a few special requests to gauge responsiveness. Then the following morning she would reveal her identity and begin the hard work of transformation. The front desk supervisor adjusted his tie nervously as he led Pam toward the management office. His name tag read Thomas, and the confused look on his face suggested he couldn't decide if she was a problem guest or something worse. "Ms. Miller, I assure you that we take guest concerns seriously," he said, his voice carrying that practiced customer service tone that never quite sounds sincere. "But there's really no need to speak privately. I can address your concerns right here." Pam kept her expression neutral. "I prefer we speak in the office, please." The walk felt longer than it actually was. Thomas kept glancing back at her, clearly trying to place her face. They passed a housekeeper who looked away quickly, not wanting to be pulled into whatever drama was unfolding. The management office was located in a back corridor behind a door marked "Staff Only." It wasn't exactly hidden, but it was certainly designed to be unnoticeable to guests. Thomas knocked once on the office door before opening it. "Hold my calls," he told the administrative assistant sitting at the outer desk. The young woman nodded, eyes widening slightly at Pam's presence in this staff-only area. The inner office was modest but comfortable. A desk dominated the space, covered with paperwork, a computer monitor, and framed photos of what Pam assumed were family members. A small conference table sat in the corner with 4 chairs around it. "Please have a seat," Thomas said, gesturing to one of the chairs across from the desk. He took his own seat behind it, clearly feeling more comfortable on his territory. Now how can I help resolve your concerns? Pam remained standing. Is the hotel manager available? She asked. Thomas's expression tightened. Mr. Lopez is off today. As the front desk supervisor, I can address any issues you're having. I see. Pam nodded slowly. And the general manager? Now Thomas looked truly uncomfortable. Ms. Wilson is in a corporate meeting off-site. I'm the senior manager on duty right now. Whatever your concerns are, I'm authorized to handle them. I understand, Pam said. She reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet, removing her actual ID. Not the Patricia Miller credit card she'd been using. She placed it on the desk. My name is Pamela Bondi. Thomas glanced at the ID, confusion still evident on his face. The name might not mean anything to you yet, Pam continued, but as of Monday morning, I'll be the new chief executive officer of Luxury Horizons Hotel Group, the company that now owns this hotel. The blood drained from Thomas's face so quickly that Pam momentarily worried he might faint. His mouth opened and closed several times without producing any sound. I don't understand, he finally managed. Pam took a folder from her purse and placed it beside her ID. Inside were copies of the acquisition paperwork and her appointment letter. I've been staying at the hotel under my maiden name for the past 3 days, experiencing it as a regular guest would. Thomas picked up the documents with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the papers, growing wider with each line he read. This is, he began, but couldn't seem to finish the thought. Real, Pam supplied. Very real. She finally took a seat, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap. I'd like to speak with as many of the management team as possible. Whoever is on site today. Can you arrange that? Thomas fumbled for the phone on his desk, nearly knocking it to the floor in his haste. Yes, of course, Ms. Bondi, right away. He punched a button on the phone. Lisa, I need you to call everyone in. Everyone. Food and beverage manager, housekeeping head, maintenance chief, everyone who's on property right now. Tell them to come to the main conference room immediately. He paused. No, it's not a drill. It's urgent. He hung up and looked at Pam with new eyes, seeing her expensive watch and the designer purse she'd kept hidden during her stay. Even in casual clothes, now that he was really looking, she clearly wasn't an ordinary guest. The conference room is just down the hall, he said, standing quickly. It might take 10 or 15 minutes to gather everyone. That's fine, Pam said calmly. While we wait, perhaps you could tell me how long you've worked here, Thomas. The personal question seemed to throw him. 8 years, Ms. Bondi. I started as a night auditor and worked my way up. 8 years is a significant investment of your life, Pam observed. You must have seen the hotel in better days than these. Thomas swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. The Grand Plaza used to be the best hotel in the city. We won awards. Celebrities stayed here. But the last few years, he trailed off, unsure how candid he should be. The last few years? Pam prompted. Cost-cutting measures. Staff reductions. Training programs eliminated. The previous owners were trying to maximize profits to make the hotel more attractive to buyers. He winced, realizing what he'd just said. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... No need to apologize for telling the truth, Pam said. I suspected as much. Short-term profit boosts at the expense of long-term reputation. A common but misguided strategy. A light knock at the door interrupted them. The administrative assistant poked her head in. Everyone's gathering in the conference room now, Mr. Thomas. Thank you, Lisa, he said, standing again. Ms. Bondi, if you'll follow me. The main conference room was designed for board meetings and large-scale planning sessions. A long mahogany table ran down the center, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs. The room could easily seat 20 people, though only about a dozen were nervously filing in now. Pam stood at the head of the table, watching as various department heads and supervisors took their seats. Their expressions ranged from curious to worried. Clearly, the urgent summons without explanation had set off alarm bells. Thomas cleared his throat, still looking shell-shocked. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Miss Pamela Bondi. A few polite nods greeted her, but most just looked confused. Ms. Bondi is... Thomas faltered, then rallied. Ms. Bondi is the new CEO of Luxury Horizons Hotel Group. She's been staying here undercover for the past 3 days. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. One woman near the back actually covered her mouth with her hand. A maintenance supervisor turned so pale that the man next to him asked if he was okay. Good afternoon, Pam said, her voice quiet but carrying throughout the suddenly silent room. I want to start by saying I'm not here to fire anyone. The collective relief was almost palpable, shoulders dropping and breaths being released. I'm here because I care deeply about this hotel and all the properties in our portfolio. The Grand Plaza has a storied history in this city. It used to be known for exceptional service and an unforgettable guest experience. I'm here because I want to understand what changed and how we can bring back that standard of excellence. She opened her notebook, the same one she'd been jotting notes in throughout her stay. Over the past 3 days, I've observed numerous issues that concern me. Indifferent front desk service, room cleaning oversights, maintenance problems left unaddressed, staff more engaged with their phones than with guests. Several people around the table squirmed uncomfortably or stared down at their hands. But I've also observed something else, Pam continued. I've seen a workforce that's worried about their future. I've heard rumors that jobs might be cut after the acquisition. I've noticed a lack of proper training and support. She closed the notebook and looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. Those things are not your fault. They're failures of leadership. And as the new leader of this company, I take full responsibility for fixing them. The room was completely silent now, everyone hanging on her every word. Tomorrow morning, I'd like to hold an all-staff meeting. Everyone who works at this hotel, from the general manager to the newest housekeeper. Can that be arranged? The food and beverage manager raised his hand slightly. The breakfast shift starts at 5 a.m. and the night shift doesn't end until 7 a.m. It's hard to get everyone in one place. Pam nodded. Then we'll hold 2 meetings, one at 7:30 a.m. for the overnight and morning shifts, and another at 3 p.m. for everyone else. I want to speak with every single employee. Yes, ma'am, he replied. In the meantime, Pam continued, I'd like each of you to prepare a brief assessment of your department, what's working well, what isn't, and what you need to succeed. Be honest, there will be no penalties for candor. In fact, I'll be disappointed if you sugarcoat things. She looked around the table again. Does anyone have any questions for me? After a moment of hesitation, the housekeeping manager raised her hand. Are you really not going to fire anyone? Most new management starts by cleaning house. I'm not most new management, Pam replied with a small smile. I believe in building people up, not tearing them down. The only way someone will lose their job under my leadership is if they refuse to grow and improve after being given proper support and training. The grand ballroom of the hotel was filled to capacity at 7:30 the next morning. Staff members stood in small clusters, whispering nervously to each other. Rumors had spread overnight despite management's best efforts at discretion. Some said everyone would be fired. Others insisted the hotel was being sold again. A few even claimed the hotel would be demolished to make way for luxury condos. At precisely 7:30, Pam walked into the room. She'd exchanged her casual undercover clothes for a tailored navy suit that exuded authority without being intimidating. Her hair was styled professionally, and she wore subtle makeup and a single strand of pearls. This was the Pam Bondi that business magazines featured in their Most Powerful Women in Hospitality lists, not the overlooked guest of the past 3 days. A hush fell over the room as she approached the podium. The general manager, Ms. Wilson, stood nearby looking deeply uncomfortable. She'd been called back from her off-site meeting late last night and had the shell-shocked expression of someone whose career had just flashed before their eyes. Good morning, Pam began, her voice warm but firm. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Pamela Bondi. As of today, I am the Chief Executive Officer of Luxury Horizons Hotel Group, which now owns the Grand Plaza Hotel. The whispers started again, louder this time. 3 days ago, I checked into this hotel under my maiden name. I stayed in room 714 as a regular guest. I ate in your restaurant, ordered from room service, visited your bar, and used your facilities. I did this because I wanted to experience the Grand Plaza exactly as your guests do, without special treatment or preparation. She paused, letting her words sink in. Some staff members looked at their feet. Others exchanged worried glances. A few brave souls maintained eye contact with her. What I experienced was disappointing. Pam didn't raise her voice, but her words landed heavily in the quiet room. Long waits for service, indifferent staff, dirty rooms, maintenance issues left unaddressed, a general atmosphere of apathy that pervaded nearly every interaction I had. A young bellhop near the front swallowed visibly. A housekeeper in the back row dabbed at her eyes. I could stand here and list every failure I observed, but that's not why I called this meeting. Pam stepped out from behind the podium, moving closer to the staff. I'm here because despite everything I just said, I believe in the Grand Plaza. I believe in its history, its potential, and most importantly, I believe in all of you. The tension in the room shifted slightly. Worried frowns turned to cautious curiosity. When I spoke with your department heads yesterday, I learned something important. I learned that many of you have been working under the fear of losing your jobs since the acquisition was announced. I learned that training programs were cut, staffing was reduced, and resources were limited, all to make the hotel's financials look better on paper. Pam shook her head. That stops today. Right now. She walked slowly across the front of the room, making eye contact with as many staff members as she could. I'm not here to fire anyone. I'm here to invest in you, to rebuild what made the Grand Plaza special, but I need your help to do it. For the first time since she began speaking, Pam saw glimmers of hope on the faces before her. Starting today, we're implementing a new approach at the Grand Plaza. I call it the 3 R's. Respect, resources, and recognition. She counted them off on her fingers. Respect means treating every guest and every coworker like they matter because they do. Resources means you'll have the proper training, staffing, and materials to do your jobs well. And recognition means good work will be noticed and rewarded. A hand went up in the middle of the crowd. It belonged to an older woman in a housekeeping uniform. Yes, Pam acknowledged her. That sounds nice, the woman said, her voice carrying a lifetime of skepticism about management promises. But how is it going to actually happen? We've heard big talk before. Rather than being offended, Pam smiled. An excellent question. Let me be specific. By the end of today, each department will have a dedicated budget for immediate improvements. Need new vacuum cleaners? Order them. Short-staffed? We'll hire. Training outdated? We'll bring in experts. She held up a folder. I have here the first draft of a new employee handbook that includes a 10% across the board raise for all staff who've been here more than 6 months. A ripple of surprised murmurs spread through the room. Additionally, we're implementing a guest satisfaction bonus program. When our scores go up, everyone shares in the success. The skepticism in the room began to give way to cautious optimism. Pam could see it happening in real time. Shoulders relaxing, small smiles appearing, colleagues exchanging hopeful glances. But none of this matters without a change in culture, Pam continued. The Grand Plaza was once known for extraordinary service. People didn't just stay here. They experienced something special. Together, we're going to bring that back. She returned to the podium. Over the next 30 days, we'll be rolling out a comprehensive training program for every department. Not just technical training, but service excellence training. How to anticipate needs before they're expressed. How to turn problems into opportunities. How to make each guest feel like the only guest. Pam looked directly at the general manager. Ms. Wilson and I will be meeting daily to track our progress. Every department head will have clear goals and the resources to achieve them. And I'll be personally staying at the hotel at least 1 night per month, sometimes announced, sometimes not, to ensure we're maintaining our standards. The door at the back of the ballroom opened, and a team of people wheeled in several carts loaded with breakfast pastries, fruit, coffee, and juice. But first, let's have breakfast together, Pam said with a warm smile. I want to hear your ideas. You're on the front lines every day. You know what needs fixing better than anyone. As the staff broke into smaller groups enjoying the unexpected breakfast, Pam moved from table to table. She listened more than she spoke, jotting notes in the same small notebook she'd used during her undercover stay. By the end of the hour, she had 3 pages of practical suggestions from bellhops, housekeepers, maintenance workers, and kitchen staff. That was the first day of the Grand Plaza's transformation. What followed was a whirlwind of activity that energized the historic property in ways not seen for decades. True to her word, Pam allocated substantial resources for immediate improvements. Housekeeping received new equipment and 2 additional staff members to ensure rooms were properly cleaned. The restaurant hired a sous chef to support the overworked kitchen team. Maintenance finally had the budget to address the backlog of repair requests that had been accumulating for months. But the physical improvements were just the beginning. The real change came through the intensive training program that Pam personally helped design. Every employee, from the general manager to the newest dishwasher, went through the same core customer service training. They learned the history of the Grand Plaza and its significance to the city. They practiced handling difficult situations and anticipating guest needs. Most importantly, they began to take pride in their work again. 3 months after Pam's revelation, guest satisfaction scores had risen by 40%. 6 months later, they were the highest in the hotel's history. The Grand Plaza was once again featured in travel magazines, this time for its exceptional service and attention to detail. Staff turnover, which had been nearly 60% annually before Pam's arrival, dropped to less than 15%. The employee satisfaction survey showed that 92% of staff felt valued and supported in their roles. The wait list for open positions grew as word spread about the positive work environment. True to her promise, Pam returned monthly, sometimes staying as Patricia Miller, sometimes as herself. The staff came to welcome these visits rather than fear them, knowing they were opportunities to showcase their improvements and suggest new ideas. 1 year after her initial undercover stay, Pam stood in the ballroom again, this time to celebrate the Grand Plaza's remarkable turnaround. The hotel had just won the prestigious 5 Diamond Award, placing it among the elite hotels in the country. "This isn't my achievement," she told the assembled staff, many of whom had tears in their eyes. "This is yours. You embraced change. You committed to excellence. You made the Grand Plaza special again." She raised a glass in toast. "To the finest hotel team I've ever had the privilege of working with. Thank you for proving what I believed from the beginning, that with the right leadership, resources, and recognition, people will always rise to the occasion." What became known as the Bondi method was soon implemented across all 37 properties in the Luxury Horizons portfolio. Executives were required to stay undercover at least quarterly at their assigned hotels. Training programs were standardized and enhanced. Resources were allocated based on actual needs rather than arbitrary budgets. But perhaps the most significant change was the company's new motto, printed on small cards that every employee carried. Treat everyone like they're the boss, because someday they might be. And occasionally, in hotels across the country, a quiet woman named Patricia Miller would check in with minimal luggage and keen, observant eyes, ready to experience the service firsthand. The staff never knew when she might appear, and that was exactly the point.